Hello BookTube, it's Leah Cooper here, and today I'm bringing you a review of Infinity Wars. I received an arc of this anthology via NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. All opinions are, of course, my own. So this is a multi-author themed anthology being put out by Solaris Press, which is a division of Rebellion Publishing. It is edited by Jonathan Straham, and it contains 15 short stories by a variety of different authors. So the way I rate short story collections is that I rate each individual story on its own, and then I do an average star rating for the entire collection. So my average star rating for this is 4.1 stars, rounded to 4 stars, and overall I quite enjoyed this collection. It is, I want to say, like the 7th in a series of multi-author short story collections, all of them with the title Infinity Blank, wherein each of them explores a different, I think, science fiction theme. So this one specifically features stories that explore concepts of war, looking at what might war look like in the near future, in the far-flung future. With multi-author anthologies, I find sometimes they can be kind of a mixed bag, and I think this is a pretty common reaction a lot of readers have to multi-author anthologies, wherein you might like half the stories, or you might only like a couple of the stories and the rest of them don't jive with you. That has been my experience in the past reading multi-author anthologies. However, I think the theme and the care Jonathan Straham took to choose the stories that he included in this collection actually make for a very cohesive reading experience. One of the things I noticed in this collection, while there are certain standout stories and a few stories in particular that really resonated in particular with me, as a whole, there's no one story that really stands out in my memory as something I felt didn't belong in the collection or was out of place or anything like that. And also, I would say that many of these stories, even though they are by different authors, even though they are the settings, characters, and themes, range all over the place, from a near future Earth where aliens have landed to very distant Earth colonies that have no contact with Earth. Even though there's a wide range of subject matters, many of the stories actually felt almost as though they could have existed in the same universe together. So that is to say, the writing styles, the themes that are explored, they're all very complementary in this collection, and there was no moment where any individual story jarred me out of my reading experience, which I think is a mark of a solid collection that's very worth picking up if the subject matter interests you. Another thing I thought was really fantastic was also the mix of voices. So even though they were complementary, there are still a myriad of different voices. You know, we have a great mix of men and women, we have white authors, we have authors of color, we have American authors, as well as several authors from other nationalities. And so that introduces elements in the collection where we're not experiencing just a white American-centric vision of the future. A couple of standout stories in particular, ones that I gave 5 stars, for example. The Moon is Not a Battlefield by, and excuse me, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Indrapramit Das. Really apologize if I'm butchering that. Which is a story where India has actually taken the forefront in creating a colony on the moon and is locked in something of a turf war with other countries trying to colonize the moon. And we are being retrospectively told this story of how an orphan off the streets of India was taken into the military and taken to the moon as something called an Asura, which is kind of like a mechanized soldier who fought this, you know, turf war until faster than light travel was created, thereby making the colonies obsolete, and was returned to Earth only to discover that her bones are brittle and she cannot walk and she cannot work, and she's been discharged with nothing, essentially. And the way that, I think that sounds like a very common collection of military sci-fi tropes all put together, but the story is told in these reflective pieces that in such a short span of time I felt very attached to the characters, and the characters that the relationships the characters had made, these Asuras had made between one another while they were colonists on the moon or soldiers on the moon. And I won't lie, the end of the story actually made me tear up, which doesn't happen so much in short stories as it does in novels. Another standout 5-star short story from this collection was Conversations with an Armory by Garth Nix. Now, I love Sabriel. There's no denying that Garth Nix can write, and while I am familiar with this fantasy, I'd never read anything science fiction by him, and so that was really cool to see in this collection. And the story was so good. It's so clever, snappy, funny. We're given very little actual information, and most of it is told, as the title would suggest, entirely in conversational dialogue. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think all of it's told in conversational dialogue. It takes place on an old school decommissioned battle cruiser that's been left adrift in our solar system as kind of a futuristic Walter Reed, where the most damaged military personnel are left to get as good a medical care as they can on this thing, and it's not great. And we are introduced right in the thick of things while aliens are trying to invade our solar system, and all of the more technologically advanced ships have been disabled, and so the patients on this old battle cruiser are trying to get into the armory of the ship because it's the only part of that ship that still has weapons in it, and the AI that guards the door of the armory is like this old AI model that actually had artificial intelligence before they stopped doing that. And so it's this conversation between the patients and the ship armory while it's trying to, verify who they are and whether they should have access and all this sort of stuff. And it's serious, it's poignant, it's funny, it's clever. It's definitely commenting on the state of, military discharge and medical care for those wounded in action and how we deal with them today, even though it's taking place on a spaceship. A couple other standout stories, these weren't 5 stars, but they were 4 or 4.5 stars for me, and if I butcher anyone's surnames, I apologize. Oracle by Dominica Phettaplace. Weather Girl by E.J. Swift. This one in particular I was reading while the hurricane damage was impacting Houston and Irma was just about to hit Cuba, and it was kind of chilling to read because it takes place in a future Earth where we've destroyed the atmosphere so badly that it's just one 100-year or 200-year storm after another. 2 more really standout stories that stick in my head were Heavies by Rich Larson, as well as Zeros by Peter Watts. Specifically in my notes, I said that Heavies, which is kind of this piece of noirish detective science fiction, takes place on a planet that this government has subjugated, and it had flavors of Miranda from Firefly in it, wherein the population, which has previously been fairly subdued as far as subjugated populations go, are suddenly turning on the occupying humans, and we have this kind of detective trying to figure out what's going on and why suddenly the aliens are murdering humans and everything, and it's fantastic. And then we have Zeros, which takes place in a future where there are these coalition factions where the protagonist dies in an engagement and then is given the option to come back as essentially a zombie in his own body with 50-50 control, wherein these scientists have harnessed the subconscious, and there are just all these layers where you're watching this character as part of this squad, and you realize that these people, especially when their subconsciousnesses take over, they would be the villain foot soldiers in a film, and it's such a twist to be viewing it from their perspective, those characters' perspectives. So overall, it is an interesting collection, lots of really great ideas, lots of solid writing. If you're a science fiction fan, if you're a military science fiction fan, I would highly suggest picking this up. I think you'll find some really great stories in here. I think a lot of the authors might be familiar to regular readers of science fiction, but who knows, you could certainly possibly discover a couple of new names you hadn't read before. I certainly did, and there are many authors from this collection I will be picking up in the future. That is my review of Infinity Wars, a multi-author anthology from Solaris Press, edited by Jonathan Straham. Let me know if any of these sound interesting to you or what you think of short story collections down below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.